Hello and welcome to the Rhythm Changes podcast. I'm your host, Will Chernoff, and this episode is sponsored by Pearson Instruments. That's Brad Pearson, who's a luthier and guitar tech in Vancouver. He's in the South Van area, Marpole neighborhood off of Oak Street. I've been taking my instruments to Brad. I highly recommend you take your string instruments to him too, to get them feeling and sounding beautiful. What have I taken to him so far? Well, I've taken my acoustic guitar, my electric bass, my upright bass. I would say upright bass is probably right smack dab in the middle of his wheelhouse because he's a great bass player himself, but he also does a lot of great work on guitars and electric guitars and basses too. I'll probably take a mandolin to him at some point as well, or any other instruments that I have around my place or my family's homes, because when your instruments feel good, it's always more inspiring to play them. It gets you playing more. So I'd love for you to experience that too. Go to pearsoninstruments.ca to learn more about Brad and his services. That's pearsoninstruments.ca. Thanks to Brad for sponsoring the show. This episode is also sponsored by 12th Street Sound. That's Anthony Senarini in New Westminster, the guy, the recording engineer who produces, records, and mixes your music. And this is the last week where I'm announcing our special promotion together at 12thstreet.ca/RCP, where you as a listener of this show get an exclusive deal. You can get up to 20% off your next recording project locally here. So Anthony's put that together for bands on a budget and all comers who want to try something different like that. If you have a particularly intricate project, he is still more than happy to give you a discount. Again, to access that offer, go to 12thstreet.ca/RCP. That's 12thst.ca/RCP. Act now because we arranged this promotion up to September 30th, 2022, and that is this Friday. So reach out to Anthony now, tell him what you're doing, make sure he knows that the Rhythm Changes podcast sent you. Thanks to Anthony and 12th Street for supporting the podcast.
You know, like those amazing classical composers, like if I think about those Chopin preludes, like I was checking that a lot, or Rachmaninoff preludes, and I was like, these tunes, it sounds like they existed forever. It's like, it's hard to believe that someone wrote them.
From Montreal to Vancouver, we're featuring a piano player today who is coming to tour in our area, who loves tea. We actually compared which teas we're drinking at the beginning of this episode, and we talked about the 3 albums that her group has made to date. It's a fun ride. I'm excited to hear her live when she comes to the city, and that's up next. You're listening to the interview podcast about jazz and creative music in Canada. Our guest today is a pianist who released her 3rd contemporary jazz trio album, Walls Made of Glass, on September 23rd, 2022. The album features Levi Dover on bass and Louis Vincent Hamel on drums, and the trio will perform here in Vancouver at Frankie's Jazz Club on Thursday, September 29th. That's tomorrow night, as well as tonight, Wednesday, September 28th, for those who happen to be near Victoria and Vancouver Island at Herman's. You can also get the album on Bandcamp if you can't make it to any of those, and visit the artist on her website and social media, of course. So please welcome to the Rhythm Changes podcast from Montreal, Gentiane MG.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here today.
It's great to have you. I'm looking forward to hearing you in Vancouver. But I wanted to start with this that I have right here for listeners of the show. I've got a nice mug of tea. I've heard that you're a tea fan. You've got some too, so I was thinking maybe we could compare beverages here. Do you want to go first?
Sure. I'm drinking Darjeeling First Flush from India. It's a black tea, but it's almost like a green tea, so it's kind of in between, and it's amazing. What are you drinking?
Nice. That sounds good. Well, for listeners, I brought the package here so I could remind myself, because I decided to go away from what would have been instant coffee this morning and ramp it up a little bit, be a little bit more classy because I knew you were going to be here, Gentiane. I went with a white tea, so a good amount of caffeine. And this brand of it is called Silver Yeti, and apparently it's from Nepal, so not too far from where your Darjeeling tea would have been, I suppose.
That's amazing. Well, cheers to that.
I know. There you go. Take a sip. I'm trying to figure out my caffeine intake and different things around waking up and sleep lately because I've started a new job recently and I'm waking up earlier than I ever did back when I was performing full time. So I had to think a lot about that. And one of the things that I found was, well, it seems like if I drink the caffeine like a little bit after I wake up, it seems to power me through the day a little bit better than if I had drank it like within 15 minutes of getting up, like I might want to just ordinarily. So I don't know. I know you're interested in like obviously tea, like we mentioned, that's a cool connection. But exercise as well, you do different things. Do you think about that sort of stuff?
Yeah, actually, well, I guess the caffeine intake it became kind of out of control like lately, but normally I try to limit myself now. I guess with tea, well, part of why I really enjoy drinking tea is that I one thing that I know is that the caffeine rush is less intense but longer because of the tannins that so it's like so I like so if I drink a lot of tea for then I'm gonna be like good for a few hours. Like it's like two kettles a day spaced by about 6 hours. It's like basically I'm always under the effects of caffeine, which is questionably healthy, but that's great. And once in a while I have a coffee, but then I don't like it because it's like I get so like it is way too intense for an hour and then I need sleep because it burns all the
Oh,
it's there's something about like the coffee boost it feels different to me anyways.
oh, it's
So
too intense or something. Interesting. Yeah.
but it's like more for to me it like feels more sustainable so because it's always a little but not too much, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyways, yeah.
Yeah. So I want to talk about the touring and about the music as well. But first, I'm curious, can you tell me about your story kind of meeting the other two members of your trio who are coming here to BC, Levi
Yes.
Dover and Louis Vincent Amel? Can you tell me about how you started collaborating together?
Yeah, so actually, we actually met like in school like a while ago because we were all studying at McGill, like McGill University that has a like a good like jazz program here in Quebec, and so yeah, so we had I think we had a combo together back then, and that's how it started. Like I played with Louis for many years in school. We for some reason we happened to have every combo we did like what it was always him. So yeah, I guess we was just already playing with everyone, and so yeah, and then so that's I guess that was around like 2014 where I started like to compose more seriously and kind of I wanted to have a band, you know. So that started yeah, I guess in 2014 and then we've been kind of slowly like you know like playing more and more and yeah, and I've enjoyed this band like a lot. Like they're both like what's so cool is that they're amazing musicians and they're both also composers and they're very even like you know they're very complete musicians like both of them so it's cool to have like side from um like to be able like because it's my music I compose but then they really you know they all have inside cool inside and now this maybe this we could do it like that or and it's there's also like a collaboration that kind of took place like over the years in that way so that's really cool.
Yeah, and it's cool to check out all of your albums because it's pretty continuous. Like you can hear the story all the way through with the same band members and a similar composition approach. There's different variations that I could hear along the way and different things that stood out to me from each album. And I would say that the recent one was my favorite because it kind of brought out the best of the previous two. That's the way I reacted to it, at least when I kind of consumed them all in one go, like listening to them in advance of this. But for you, those are interesting timestamps, like 2017 release for Eternal Cycle. That's your first album. Wonderland released in 2019. That's the second album. And then here we are with Walls Made of Glass. So what stands out to you as the either the differences between the two albums or like where they sit in your life on the way, like when they came out?
Yeah, I'm first of all, I'm glad. I find it so cool that you're saying that because I think it's exactly, it's exactly what it is. Like I kind of, it's funny how like, well, I guess like 'cause every album is like, yeah, it's like a picture of where you're at, like in your, at that time in your life and in music or whatever, which is often very related. But um, it's funny because I was also thinking back to those two first albums, and it's like the first album. I guess I didn't know what I was doing. No, in a way, I knew what I was doing, but there was something about it, like something about like when you do something for the first time, and also the first album, it's like I guess whatever the collection of whatever um, I had been writing for a few years, and then it's like, okay, now I'm gonna do an album. There's something naive about that, about the process in a way. For me, anyways, it was a bit like very instinctive in a way. Like there's some like I wrote the whole album within like 5 months, and then went to the studio for a day, and then I just kind of this, and it turned out well, we were lucky because that one day like we were really prepared, and then something really cool happened, and like anyways, and then I went in a different phase where I was like, oh, like now I want to compose, and like the second album, it's much more kind of in reaction to that first one, where it's like, okay, I want to kind of, yeah, like maybe have more complex forms and kind of spend more time on like the details of it and come up with this thing, and and then for the third album, this last one, I was thinking about the first album, which was there's a spark that comes from like things that are instinctive, I think, and I really believe in like what if you just listen to what comes to your mind, what comes, like whether it's like a very simple melody or whatever. And then I was like, I really want to like get back to that kind of contact with whatever comes naturally. And then of course, like I spent a lot of time working on it, but it was a bit more I really wanted to go on a kind of, I don't know, want to use the word organic, but like, yeah, work, but in a way that's instinctive. So it's like, I don't know, I go for a walk and I just listen. It's, maybe, oh yeah, maybe this. And there was a lot of filtering things and trying to get to the root of it. Like my motto for that last album, I guess, was like, I was thinking about like like those amazing classical composers. Like if I think about those Chopin preludes, like I was checking that a lot, or Rachmaninoff preludes, and I was like, these tunes, it sounds like they existed forever. It's like it's hard to believe that someone wrote them, because it's just like it's just like, yeah, this music, this is music. It's like, oh, this. I was like, why is that? And
Huh.
I was like, I guess like it's like there's not any note that in those pieces that get rid of, or that I could change without tremendously affecting those pieces in a
Huh.
way. And then I was kind of trying to work on this last repertoire, thinking about that. So if there's anything that I could change or remove or whatever, it means that it's not finished. So I tried to go towards that, which made a much longer process in a way, because it took a long time to get there, I guess. And it was interesting. So yeah. So I think this album, it might be a bit more I don't know what's the word in English, but the épuré, like, yeah, there's like maybe more space, like more, it's kind of more yeah, like to the root of things,
Yeah.
like that's what I was going for anyways.
Nice. Yeah. And all that stuff you talked about in that preparation and wanting to really iron out all the songs, that's all in the composition phase for you, right? Like that's before you go in and record the
Yes,
tunes. Yeah.
for sure. Yeah. So, and I guess like it was because I wrote all this music in the last. So I don't want to use, I don't like using that word because it's not inspiring, but I was feeling inspired. But during the pandemic, okay, let's say I wrote this music during the pandemic, but which was interesting because there was so much time, and it was like the first time in my life that I could really just compose, like even like for a few months in the process of like as a in the process of composing the music, I like barely played. Like I didn't. I just that's all I did. Like just going for walks, thinking about this music and being kind of obsessed. And it was interesting to have only that hat. Like I'm not doing anything else. I don't have my life to take care of. Like I can just live with this music and see what happens.
Yeah, well, I say maybe in broad strokes, like if I think about the three albums again, like Eternal Cycle, I mean, I think of there being quite a few ballads on that album, and maybe it's hard to draw the line at which of your compositions is a ballad because it's not like a singer singing a song at a slow
Right.
tempo, right? But I would
Yeah.
say like just going back to Walls Made of Glass, like maybe something that really feels like one of your ballads to me is Burning Candle, like the second last track. Like that is kind of a more free feeling,
Yeah.
slower, softer arrangement. And so there were a few of those on the first album, and that stuck out to me as kind of one of the moods of the first album. And then the second album I found more aggressive, and it featured the members of the trio a lot more prominently. Like there were a lot more bass and drum kind of spots. And so then it's interesting, like you have an intro track and an outro track on Walls Made of Glass, but like the first full track of the new album, the Flowers Laugh Without Uttering a Sound, like that's a pretty intense track. It has like that 5/8 thing, like you could almost call it like the quintuplet swing kind of feel, or like the
Yeah.
5/8 kind of constant groove. And then there's some other kind of very dynamic arrangements in there. So that's why it's interesting that it combines the two things. To me, is that the first album has the softer kind of impression that it leaves you with, and the second album has the darker one.
Yeah. Interesting. I guess yeah, and I like also the like yeah, I guess dynamics and kind of going like to be able to go completely very very high energy, and then I guess that might be like my classical roots or whatever, but it's yeah. And then it's like figuring out how to master this, like do you if you should leave the dynamics or not, but that's another conversation. But it's always tricky to figure that out, like with sound.
Oh yeah, that's true. Like when you're actually preparing the final tracks from the
Yeah.
mixes, yeah, how much do you crank it up or how much do you flatten it out? Yeah, huh.
Yeah, they're big. They're like a crazy choice. I didn't used to think about those things as much, and I guess for that too, I started to realize, like, oh my God, like yeah, how the album sounds really affects the music basically. So it's like, and there's a lot of choices to be made. Yeah.
Yeah. How did you end up falling on that with this? Do you feel like you compromise the dynamics a lot, or do you feel like like, oh, I want to leave them because it comes across as still being very dynamic, whatever you did decide
No,
internally?
I think we actually decided to go more leave the dynamic, so it's not very compressed. So yeah, no, I'm really happy of how it came across. Like I really kind of yeah, the master engineer, everyone did an amazing job, and I was like I brought in a piano technician who was like so amazing. Like he spent like 2 hours on the piano every morning, and he made it was crazy. Like I've never seen. It's like a magician. Like he just made the piano sound like just the piano itself. Like, oh my God. I shouldn't have never done that because I set up like way too high standards for myself. Now I'm never gonna be happy with any piano. But anyways, yeah, yeah, I'm glad about that. I guess like also like after a few recordings, like it's like you, you learn, like live and learn also. So it's like when you start, it's hard. Like you go in the studio and it's like, well, it becomes a question of luck a little bit at the beginning, because you might like be lucky and the master engineer you hire has the same vision than you or whatever, or you, but it's a learning process to be able to express like what we want like in that way. And I'm sure you know that, but it's interesting, yeah.
Yeah, that's super important. You have a track in the middle of this album called Message, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, does this track, I believe I heard, does it have a quote of the theme from MASH, Suicide is Painless?
Oh, I'm not sure. Maybe
I thought I
without
heard
them.
that da 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 da
Good.
in
Oh,
there.
I guess it's kind of, oh, in the solo section, yeah, I mean, it's possible. Um, I guess it's funny, like this happens so often that we quote something without noticing because I guess maybe I've heard it like at some point and it just came out. Yeah, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Because you're
funny.
influenced by Bill Evans, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah. It's a one of the pianists that I did check about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a Bill Evans story about that album Portrait in Jazz for sure. It's just whenever I think of him, uh I think about like his playing on just like swinging tempos and how like even though he was such a kind of expressive, intimate piano player, he could also just play swing and bop lines like at a moving tempo with some vigor. And like on that track of Autumn Leaves from Portrait in Jazz, I just remember
So good.
my bass teacher for the time, Andre Lachance, who's been on this podcast here in Vancouver, when he put that on for me for the first time, I just remember like when the time kicked in and when Bill started soloing, like how he like mimed the drums and the face that he made about like how he felt about that feeling. It's like, which you can't see, of course, if you're listening, but
Yeah.
you can imagine like it's not quite a bass face, but it's like that swing face. It's like, yeah, we're going like that kind of thing.
That's amazing. It's so funny that you're talking about that track specifically because it's the first jazz track that I liked in my life. It's like the thing that I listen like to specifically that Autumn Leaves. Like
Yeah.
that's kind of what brought me into jazz. So that's funny that you're reminding me of memories in
Where
high
were
school.
you when you heard that?
I was in high school. I was because I'm from a small town like in Quebec, and called Saguenay, and yeah, I don't know where I was like. So yes, anyways, yeah. So I was listening to. I don't know how I discovered it. I have no idea. I probably heard the name Bill Evans, and then I just went to check it out. I was studying classical in conservatoire, and yeah, and that's where I kind of shifted. Started from zero again, I guess. That's how it felt, anyways.
Yeah. And then one of my other favorite tracks was The Moon, the Sun, the Truth. And we were talking about dynamics. And I think that one is very dynamic because it has this kind of Afro-Cuban groove or this 12/8 groove, but it's also very soft, which is interesting because it's not like a really hard driving version of that groove. You really have some interesting kind of interplay with it, and it's got a big range.
Yeah, it's interesting this is because I well I think yeah, I guess I think I really wanted to have like three contrasting sections. Kind of that's what the idea. So the moon, the sun, and the truth. So there's in my mind, I'd kind of yeah, these three things, expressing these three things. So that's kind of what, because I think I started with just one section, like the main section, and I was like, oh, what am I going to do with this? And I think I tried many different things, but yeah, I guess it came across, and in the end, it was, oh yeah, I'm just gonna do like those sections that represent those kind of moods, like the. It comes from there was a quote that I read that was like, three things cannot remain hidden for very long, and it's the moon, the sun, and the truth. It's like a quote from Buddha,
Hmm.
and I thought it was cool, like, because there's this, like the truth that's. Um, Kind of trying to resurface, so that's like very kind of intense, like just this thing that we fight against, and and then the moon is kind of like kind of quiet and comforting, and then the sun is kind of in between in
Yeah.
my imagination, anyways.
Yeah. You have another trio title, like another Trinity title from Wonderland from the previous album, because you have Blue Noir Sol, right, on that album.
Yes.
Any relation there?
That's actually Blue Noir. There's actually yeah, I didn't think of it, but I guess Blue Noir Sol was a reference, yeah, to the sun. So it's like sun that's like blue and black. I have a thing with the sun for some reason. Like it's like sometimes it's too intense, and it's like it's I like it sometimes, but sometimes especially in winter. I find the sun in winter like makes me a bit anxious. Anyways,
Huh.
not anxious, but I find it like kind of. Um, it's like too direct, like anyways. So yes, I guess there is a link.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
funny.
Well, it's like when it's cold too. I mean, here you have a lot of those kind of days when it's not raining, because obviously it rains a lot over here in Vancouver. But in the winter, I picture these kind of really cold mornings where it's like a totally clear sky and you see the sun and that kind of thing. Yeah, it's very direct, like you said.
Yeah, and I guess like to here, like I guess because it's the idea to like, especially I don't know how it is in Vancouver, but here like especially in winter, like there's days where the sun like it gets dark so early. So it's like when it's really bright and it's sunny, it's like that very soon it's gonna go down and like get dark again. So it's like this kind of shift is
Yeah.
is I've always thought that it's like I'd rather it being like a bit more like constant or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I've only been to Montreal 4 or 5 times in my life so far, and I've only been in the months of April, May, or June. So I've been pretty
Oh,
lucky.
that's good. Those are like this is the best time. Yeah, everything's
But
blooming.
you're performing here, you're performing at Herman's and then at Frankie's. How much time have you spent out here?
Not a lot. I've been in Vancouver once to play like a few years ago. So and same thing in Victoria. So yeah, unfortunately like we're with this tour we're really playing like every day, so I won't have so much time to visit, but I hope we're gonna be able to at least like I don't know like go walk around like for the day that we're gonna be in Vancouver.
Yeah, yeah. And you're going to France too, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
That's
what's
gonna
the
be
European leg of the tour like for you?
we have like we're launching the album at the Sunside, like the like a jazz club in Paris. And then we have a few concerts like around other towns in France, and we have a concert in Amsterdam in a like little club in Amsterdam. And then yeah, that so far now that's it for this tour, but it's cool. It's like our first time in France. It's gonna be nice to be there and like probably have a few like interviews and like talk about this music that's coming out finally. And yeah.
Yeah. What are you going to perform? Are you going to perform the album in its entirety? Are you going to play some other standards too? Is what else is going to be in the repertoire when you come here?
We're probably just gonna play the repertoire from the album, and
Yeah.
if there's depending how long we play, maybe I'll probably add other originals. I find it like more and more. I find it harder and harder to play standards through this repertoire because it's. I mean, maybe if we really feel like it, but I really find that it's like this little universe and kind of it's like I yeah, unless like maybe sometimes I can play standards, but in a way that will kind of fit the music. But yeah, probably like mostly, definitely mostly originals. Yeah.
I totally identify with that, feeling like it would be a challenge to integrate standards, and so I end up with my current group preparing kind of all original sets for that reason, because the idea of like being able to do it justice and do it right seems intimidating to me.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's always like just like in terms of like yeah, I like aesthetics, I think a lot about what's this group about and what's this music about. Not necessarily like the inspirations, but just generally speaking aesthetics. And it's like yeah, I like when things kind of fall into place, like this is this concert and this is this band.
Yeah. Well, I'm very excited to hear you. I'm going to hear you and meet you in person one way or another here because you're coming all the way out to us. So I'm excited for you and the trio, and this all sounds really great. I really enjoyed your music, and thanks for taking the time to chat with me today.
Yeah, thank you. I'm super excited and yeah, hope I come across your path in
Yeah.
Vancouver.
Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of the Rhythm Changes podcast. I'm actually taking the show on a bit of a break now, and my real announcement for that will be in a bonus episode coming soon. But if you listen this far, just want to let you know that right now, I'm not going to be going weekly like I have been. I'll tell you more about why very soon, but I really appreciate you tuning into this run of the show. It's been phenomenal. The show is not dying. It's still very much here, and I'll talk to you soon. So take care.